I work with sculpture and installations and drawings. I'm not so medium fixed. There's these questions that I constantly come back to. Questions of geography, history writing, the relation between Latin America and the colonial legacy of Latin America. Questions of exile. How do you narrate this within a visual language? There is part of my background that has influenced the way I work, also the way I live and the way I've lived, and the way I think and the way I interpret the world. I live in Malmö, in Sweden. My parents are from Argentina and they came here after the coup in Argentina in '76. I have a partner, so we lived some years in Brazil. And I think also the movement of traveling between South America and Europe, of course, has made me see, I hope, and think about how this colonial history is so present. And to imagine that it's not one place and another, but they are much more intertwined. Some years ago, I found a photo, a black and white photography, like a portrait of a group of people. They're very happy, and they're on the boat between Argentina, Buenos Aires, and Barcelona. So they're crossing the Atlantic. My mother, my father, and my sister is in the photo. The paradox of this photography is that this is a photo taken in '76. So everybody in this photo are leaving Argentina, and they're living in exile, because in '76 is the coup. So people were, there's a very hard military regime started, and a lot of people were dying or were killed, murdered. Argentina has this, that 30,000 people disappeared, which are still, the bodies are not found. So there is this. The photo has this paradox of these people trying to fake, that we are happy on this boat, but everybody knows that people are saved by the way that they managed to escape. This was an Italian boat, so in the moment the boat reached international water, they are protected by law, by the maritime law, and they are under the Italian regime. It is the moment of exile in some way. It describes that moment, they're leaving. I thought a lot about, how can I narrate or visualize this kind of, exile punctum, if you use the Roland Barthes idea of the photography, not in forms of representation, which for me is very important, the difference of representations and materialization. To materialize something and not to represent something. So what I did is the name Argentina comes from argentum, which means silver. And there is this saying that when the British came to Buenos Aires, there is a river in Buenos Aires and the sun was hitting it, so it was flickering like silver. And they named it Rio de la Plata, which means the silver river. And then Argentina became from silver, argentum. So I could use that kind of starting point. I did the link between Argentina and silver, and used that this was a black and white photography from the 70s. The negative contains silver. That's why it's called silver gelatin prints. But then I went to this black and white analog printer, and then when we print black and white photography, you have the developer, stop, and the fixative. There's the three baths that you put the papers in. And then, of course, there is a lot of silver gelatin dust, the ones that stuck on the photo, and then there becomes a lot of residue. I asked the person to print it to save all the fixative, the old, used fixative. We had this kind of chemical process to extract the silver off the photos. When you see the work, I think that instead of trying to tell all this story of what is in the boat, the feelings, it's to think about, oh wow, look at this piece of silver contains this narrative, contains this story. For many, many years, like I didn't have a studio, and and sometimes I had a studio, and I didn't know how to use it. Like I spent most of the times in cafes. Then I had a residence in Berlin, and then I had a really nice studio, and then I kind of started to like to be in a studio. Then I got the studio here, so then I'm here, like I'm here on a regular basis. This is, of course, this is something I'm doing here, but usually the studio is a place where I read, I think, or I make sketches. Many times the production is someplace else. If you don't know what the South is, it's simply because you're from the North. It's like this, I hope, kind of humoristic slogan or comment. I think that what the work can do is, first of all, question what the South is and what the North is. I don't think, like, because I think, well, of course you can think, like, we live in a globe and there is a South and North. But we live in the universe, so in that sense, there is no South and North because it's just like a construction. No? The hybrid is much more present than these dichotomies of South and North. No? It is a way of, breaking that a bit. But it's also a way of not criticizing, but at least, putting a small needle into the viewer, into the North viewer, saying, look, be more open, or the knowledge you have is also produced many other places. And it's been shown in many, many different occasions. 2 times, which I think worked really well, was one, it was shown in an airport, where you put the luggage. It was vinyl on this plastic where the luggage goes. And I think the beautiful thing about that was that as it goes around, the concept of geography is constantly in movement. So the South and the North, of course, it's not clear like up and down in that sense. No? And it was also nice because it meets another audience. No? In an airport, and people come from many places in an airport. And then another way, which I also thought it was interesting, is it was shown for the Triennale in New Orleans. And there it was so clear that for many people in New Orleans, it was a relation between New Orleans, which is the south of the US, and the north of the US. So for them, it was not about South America or Europe or Sweden. It was the power of the north versus the south of the US. No? It's important that works can have that form of openness. So other people or other readers, other possible readers are invited. And in some way, I think it's very hard to work without a context. I need some form of context to produce a work. I think, in some form, you need that meeting or the institution especially you need some form of audience to see what happens, because I think the works in the end becomes something with this audience. No. That's a beautiful moment of a work, because then it's not yours anymore. You lose control of it. The way you imagine it, the way you think it should be read, or you want it to be read, you cannot control it anymore. There are other forms of reading it. There's other forms of how people walk around it. That's a great and fascinating moment for the work. You lose it in some way. Before that, I think you have all these kind of small things that are there in some way, and then you try, you think, you make sketches, but then the moment you know, like there is that place, or there is a gallery or institution or a public, then they then it has to start to materialize. I think for me, before that, I think it's very complicated to materialize something. There is this great moment when you try to invent something, to discover something, or you have this feeling that you're moving towards something that you find fascinating, and I think that's a moment in the process of creativity which is super paradoxal, because it's euphoric in some way, but it's also very doubtful. You're not sure, you think it's great, maybe it's a disaster, it goes back and forth, I think. Las Casas is not a home. It was an installation containing sculptures and drawings and collage that used the story of Bartolomé Las Casas, which he was a Jesuit priest. Las Casas in Spanish means home, but it's not a home. When San Bartolomé, he's a Jesuit priest that comes to South America, and he starts to say, no, that the native Indians, they are humans. And then it became a very famous debate in Valladolid between this Bartolomé and another priest, which was the discussion topic was that, are the native as us or not? So in a way you can think of that this is a discussion of universal rights. Bartolomé, so in a way he was very progressive. He broke in some way forms of hierarchy within the race tradition. Air d'Exile, it's a piece that it's based or it referenced or it plays with this work by Marcel Duchamp. That is called Air de Paris, that he took a glass jar and he was in Paris and he closed it and said, this is Air de Paris. I bought a packet of cigarettes like an eBay from Argentina or something similar that were old. They were from 1976. And then I collaborated with a glass blower here in Sweden. There is a very, in Småland, like a region not so far away, they have a long tradition of glass blowing, And so what we did is I smoked when he blew the glass, struck balls in some way, and I smoked inside them, within the tube. And then he closed them. So in a way, all these glass globes, contained cigarette smoke from this packet of cigarettes from 1976. So it was this forms of poetics of trying to encapsulate that time, this cigarette that is from that time that my parents exiled. When you see the work, it looks just like 20 glass globes which has nothing in it. But the smoke is there. But smoke, it's invisible. And I think that forms of invisibility, for me, connects to the actual work. This idea of the time and the materiality and the idea that forms of exile is so present but also invisible in some way. It's always here, but it's not here.
Noviembre de 1976, Puerto de Barcelona. Acabamos de desembarcar. Dejamos en la consigna el enorme baúl que me regaló la nona Elisa y varias cajas que contienen todo lo que poseemos. Sábanas, herramientas, vajilla, un disco de Piazzolla, Libertango y uno de Almendra, y los pocos libros que sobrevivieron a la huida.
I asked my father, tell me about your first cigarette when you came to Barcelona with the boat. And the first cigarette to Barcelona is symbolically, it's also the first cigarette in freedom. They managed to escape. A lot of their friends were murdered, but they managed to escape. So they're in a way, not in a democracy because Spain was still during Franco, but looking at what has happened in Argentina, they were free. So that's the question. I asked them, okay, tell me about your first cigarette on land.
Me siento sobre una valija, saco un cigarrillo, decido, por un momento, olvidarme de Argentina, del miedo, de la muerte. Decido, por un momento, no pensar en cómo me buscaré la vida en esta ciudad.
I bought like a 70s postcard from the harbor of Barcelona. And the harbor of Barcelona has a very famous Cristobal Columbus statue where he's pointing. The narration is that, of course, he should point towards the new world, no? But then it's very unclear, because if you look at it, there's a lot of discussion where he's pointing, because he's not pointing towards South America. But some people say he's pointing towards Genova, where he was born, other people are... But that's another story. But there's this kind of very iconic sculpture, or monument, I would say. No?
Enciendo el cigarrillo, aspiro hondo. Sé que las heridas cicatrizarán. Sé que sabré sobrevivir en Barcelona o en cualquier otra ciudad. Por un momento, lo que dura el cigarrillo, no tengo pasado ni futuro. Yo también soy humo. Paula llora. La última gaviota se le ha escapado. Mi mujer la alza en brazos y me dice, vámonos. Me levanto. Agarro la valija y aplasto el pucho en el empedrado del puerto.
What the works tries to do, I use my own history, but I think that the works try to do is to kind of narrate, okay, what does it mean when you have to leave? What does it mean when you have to leave everything, or you have to decide what to bring? What is it that you always leave behind, but it's still present? No? The work also tries to link link these 500 years in some way, like the Columbus movement crossing the Atlantic in 1492 to this very different, of course, movement of the Atlantic journey in 1976. There is several works that are linked to my biography. But at the same time, there is also many works that, when you look at them, they are not linked directly to my biography, but they also questions or narrate similar questions. I don't make that clear distinction between these are about me and these are about the world. I think the world and me are very intertwined. I think that's also why I can use me to try to talk about the world.